one of the most amazing professors you'll ever find at MICA. She is, I would call, a polymath, right? I don't think that she describes herself that way. Maybe in private, a lot of people do talk about her that way because she is a practicing musician. She is also somebody who is actively imagining a different India through one of the courses that she teaches at MICA. An extremely popular person. She obviously has the requisite doctorate, and I'm not even going to go into that. You can read all of the stuff on the text here and here and here. But I welcome Harmony. Today I wanted to speak to you just about two things. The first thing that I wanted to speak to you about, and both are related, but that allows me to go a little more in depth and just pick your brain about something which has been troubling me. So I want to look at meaning making and semiotics and artificial intelligence. And I know that you're very interested in both of these subjects. And I thought about the two questions that perhaps we could have a quick discussion on. And the first one is, human beings think very highly of themselves. So how will human beings now deal with the fact that they are not going to be the center of the universe, perhaps with AI coming in? And how will, what will give us our meaning for our existence? Can you go for it?
That is such a good question, Sid. I promise not to overcook or overthink my response, but I'm just going to kind of let fly off the top of my head. Um, Before I actually try and answer your question, I'm going to have to start by saying I don't think we've ever been particularly intelligent. Because for us as a species to have labored under the misconception that intelligence equaled human beings was already an enormously flawed concept.
Yeah.
It's been clear to us from the kind of pioneering work that's been coming from botany, that's been coming from a whole bunch of the life sciences from the 90s onwards. There's this beautiful phrase that comes to us from the work of Suzanne Simard, which is the wood wide web. And this is in a book called Finding the Mother Tree, which absolutely blew my mind when I read it a few years ago. But the case that she's making there is for the intelligence of trees and how trees communicate. And this is obviously a word that we think about and we think is a peculiarly human trait. In fact, human beings have been described as storytelling animals. So which is a really interesting way to come at it because it speaks about the fact that we seem to have forgotten over the course of a few centuries, and we can get into which centuries I'm talking about in a minute. We seem to have forgotten that we are animals. We seem to have forgotten that we are nature. Nature is not something that is outside of us. It doesn't exist independent of us or us independent of it. We are nature. So ours is one kind of intelligence within a wider world that has always been peopled with other kinds of intelligence.
Right.
So the fact that we're now arriving at, well, at the moment, what we're calling artificial intelligence, but soon on the horizon, artificial general intelligence,
Yes.
is not at that level, at philosophically, it's not particularly unsettling to me. It just means that there's one more modality of meaning making and intelligence that we are now sharing space with. But it was never true that we were the only ones who had this thing we call communication or intelligence in the first place. So philosophically, at that level of entry, it doesn't destabilize necessarily our ability to continue to make meaning. Because I think, and this is where the semiotics training kind of kicks in order to actually answer your question. Semiotic theory will tell us that meaning is not an absolute thing out there in the world. It's something that we are constantly negotiating. We're building it, we're making it, we're endlessly deferring it. Every word I'm saying now is forcing you to kind of think back on everything that's come before it and alter ever so slightly everything you've understood by what I've said so far.
Hmm.
To put it simply, meaning is never absolute. it's only ever something that we can kind of grasp at within a band. A word is not an absolute.
It's model making, is it?
In a sense, isn't all meaning making. You could actually kind of play with that a little bit and suggest that any act of communication which seeks to, kind of express the world the way I see it to you is necessarily going to be based on how I've modeled my entry points to reality. So there is a lot of overlap there. But I think what I'm kind of inching at is the fact that we will never know beyond the shadow of a doubt what comes up for you when I say the word orange. Will you think of the fruit? Will you think of the color? And let's for the sake of argument say you thought of the color. I won't know if you're thinking of tangerine or something that has more egg yolk in it or something that's a little bit more mustardy. We have no way of knowing that without taking recourse to other signs, other descriptors, more words. And even then, we won't know for sure. So it's a band. We know that orange falls along a particular part of the light spectrum, but exactly what is conjured for you and what I'm trying to evoke, we will never know for sure that they're an exact fit anyway. So when we study semiotics, so when we study how meaning enters the world and how it circulates within it, this is the kind of contingency that we have to kind of wrap our heads around. And, in any case, it kind of familiarizes you with the idea, and it can be quite scary at first thought, but it's really exciting if you stay with it for a minute. Meaning is not final. Nothing that has been thought or has been expressed cannot be re-expressed and therefore reimagined. And there will always be connotative layers that keep coming to sit on top of these signifiers. So it's a game, it's a process, it's something that is dialogic, it is open-ended, it is rich. And that is how human beings have always, to now finally answer your question, we've always quested after meaning. And I don't think that that is exclusively because we thought we had the monopoly on it, because in reality, we never did. We never did.
So interesting. See, it came through when you were talking as if you're looking at AI as another entity that we have to deal with rather than something that we are producing. So can you speak on that?
I love that. Yes, absolutely. Look, we share this planet, as I started by saying, by several different kinds, with several different kinds of intelligences. And the way that I'm thinking of it, AI is yet another of these that we will have to begin to contend with. It almost doesn't matter if it came from us or whether at the moment, we seem to be in a position where it is now there. And if it is now there, उसके बाद क्या करेंगे? That's the bit that I'm finding really interesting.
So you're saying you're changing the meaning right now, because up till now the meaning that maybe I had or the whole world had was, okay, we are birthing AI, and what you're saying, perhaps that's not the meaning here. It's there.
I'm suggesting कि हाँ ठीक है वो हो गया अब हमने बनाया है, and we'll play with some of the metaphors and some of the ways in which we're talking about it. I love that you use the word birthing, because I think that that's a huge, very important metaphor there. And if we were to put on our psychoanalyst hats for a second, I think we could unpack a few things from that birthing metaphor, men giving birth to artificial intelligence, because I don't know, womb envy, वो कुछ बनाना है जो हमारे बिना तो मतलब कुछ तो है वहां पे, but there is the birthing metaphor. The metaphor is a very very rich one, and it keeps coming up. But I've kind of been looking at the ways in which this niche kind of AI maker community has been thinking about what they do, and it's really exciting to see the sort of ways in which they're describing what it is they're setting out to do. So you keep running into, I mean, it depends on whether you've woken up on this side of the bed in the morning or the other one. But like on a good day, you start thinking about it as a space which is going to be plentiful, open out a whole bunch of ways in which things can happen, and it frees up people, you and I, to do more quote unquote meaningful things, which we can get back to in a second, because it ties into that meaning making question that you started me off with. But for the most part, there are a whole bunch of thinkers at the moment who are talking about AI as if it were what they're calling a Pandora's box. हमने एक बार खोल दिया, उसके बाद हमें पता नहीं इसमें से क्या निकलेगा, right? That's one I see a lot. I see the metaphor of Frankenstein's monster a lot,
Hmm.
a
Hmm.
lot, as if this is something that we've put together and we no longer know how to control it, and so on and so forth. Yeah, we've all watched Terminator, man. Like, we get it. Like, we know that this is something that has
Sure.
been spoken about for a while. My favorite narrative around this entire space right now. I'm wondering if I should share my screen with you so that you can look at this visual. But there was
We'll keep a link in the description, so don't
okay,
worry.
cool. So there was a short story by H.P. Lovecraft a long time ago, and in it he posits this entity called a Shoggoth.
Hmm.
Shoggoth was this slimy creature with many kinds of limbs and eyes, and of a material that is not even particularly organic. And in
Okay.
AI circles, this Shoggothwala image became very, very, very popular. It had a moment a few months ago. Everybody, everywhere, AI maker communities, I'm talking about right now,
Hmm.
were using this plentifully. In fact, I saw, like, I first encountered it like on a tote bag where you have this Shoggoth, and which was above which it says Chat GPT. And Bajume, you had another Shoggoth with a little smiley stuck onto it, and it said GPT-3 with human feedback reinforced learning. So, there's this, it's this delicious idea that we don't know what this is, but we want it to sound like us. We want very desperately to believe that, it is capable of engaging with us on terms of our making. But the trouble is, we
Hmm.
don't quite know what those terms fully are or will be yet. So, as somebody who's always been interested in reading society through its cultural artifacts, and narratives are one of the warehouses of these artifacts, I became really interested in collecting these little narratives to kind of see the ways in which maker communities were speaking about AI, and how the rest of us, noobs, outsiders, users, but ultimately perhaps not even so much users, but the used. We don't know yet. The jury's out on that one, how we're talking about it. And it's interesting. And of course, once I'd compiled all of this, what was I going to do with it? I took it to Chat GPT-4, right? And I was like, what do you think of my hypothesis? What do you think of these? I've been spending time with the GPT just earlier today, and we've been having a thoroughly riveting conversation on womb envy and birthing as metaphor, and so on and so forth. And yeah, so fun times, fun times.
Okay, so this brings me to my second question, maybe.
Mhm.
I want you to. I think you've spoken a bit about it, which are the kind of stories that we have created around AI. I want you
Yeah.
to give me a deeper perspective on myth making and how it's playing out right now. And let me connect it to another question, so maybe you can correlate
Mhm,
the
mhm. Yeah.
the way in which you're talking about meaning making and storytelling in human beings is that it's ever evolving, right? So it's a modeling ever evolving. So our value system is consistently evolving in some way or the other. I don't know,
It
and
has to. It has
it
to.
has.
Huh. Yeah. Yeah.
So you can't literally superimpose a value system on AI and say, okay, that's it, that's your value system.
Yep.
So how do you see that play out and connect it maybe to the myth making?
Yeah, no, I like that very much, because if we for a moment just kind of take a step back and think about where the impetus for myth making comes from in human beings, it's because I can't do better than to just quote, Levi Strauss. Levi Strauss has this beautiful line where, when he's talking about this is fieldwork that he was doing in Micronesia, Polynesia, and he says that, of the people who live there, if you cannot explain everything, you understand nothing. So the
Hmm.
quest everywhere, the impetus behind the myth making
Lovely.
was
Yeah.
wholeness, to
Hmm.
understand the fullness of the world. It didn't matter that it didn't give you material power of the world. It didn't matter that, telling this story or this engaging in this myth didn't actually change my material circumstances. It
Hmm.
wasn't going to build me a house. It wasn't going to make sure I ate that day. But it did mean that I would sleep knowing that I understood how the world works. And understanding how the world works, so at least the illusion that I understand how the world works, is what allows me to be fully human, accept my frailty, and not go completely batshit crazy.
Correct.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? The impetus behind this kind of mythifying is always a quest to try and understand, to decode what it is that is happening. Because if we think about it, at any given moment, we're told by neuroscientists that we're barely able to be cognizant of about 10% of all the stimuli that's coming at us, right?
Yeah.
Everything else, our brain is converting it into noise simply to allow us to function at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you cannot possibly overstate the importance of our stories. Teach metaphors and narratives. Part of how I describe why discourse exists is to say that we become the stories we tell, right? And myths are stories that have taken flight. Like they exist on a level that is about to take off. The bird metaphor, the soaring metaphor. This is what allows us to make sense of who we are as creatures on a planet that is not always immediately understandable, can sometimes be hostile and potentially dangerous, right? I need to come up with a convincing narrative for why it is that every few what I'm calling hours, there is this orb before I even know what it is that seems to rise and light up the sky. And this is the arc that it seems to make every day. I need to understand. If I'm going to make sense before there can be a concept of day or night or anything else, I need to explain what this cycle is. I'm not, again, suggesting that it's going to be able to give me any power over the cycle. No. But if I don't understand it or try to understand it, I have nothing, no starting point, nothing I can hold on to, which is where we seem to be with AI right now. So, or tying it back into this entire idea of mythologizing the space, I can't think of a single thing today which doesn't either seem to immediately draw on different kinds of mythical imprinting which already exists. Man, there's beautiful work about myth today, a book called Mythomania that actually speaks about all kinds of things, such as the ding, the F-sharp ding that you hear when you turn on your Mac, just for example. And how that is supposed to be, or what that is supposed to be resonant of, what that's supposed to make you think of, or think about the app, think about I could go on and on, but like there's nothing that I can think of in our world today that doesn't already come superimposed with a mythical imprint. With AI, we seem to be doing more of the same. When I say Frankenstein's monster, when I talk to you about something called Rocco's basilisk, which is again one of those, early 2010 type thought experiment mythologies that kind of came up around the idea of artificial intelligence. Or if we speak about Pandora's box, or if we speak, we could literally pick any of these, the Shogoth Wala example, it could be any of these. What are we trying to do? We're trying to accommodate something that we don't fully understand in terms of something that we do understand, right? Because these are stories, imprints, archetypes that we're all familiar with, and we're bringing those to the table, almost hopefully saying, please, like आप ये चलेगा, ये use exactly, ये fit हो रहा है, तो फिर हम ये कर सकते हैं. Something to that effect. It's almost endearing, this human urge to understand, and how before, what else this reminds me of, totally tangentially. During COVID, abhi to May nahi hua hai, and I'm already seeing report after report coming out talking about what COVID has done to the Indian consumer and blah blah. And I'm like, hey, yeah, 2 minutes. I understand where you're coming from, but Hama, we don't know. How about we just sit and wait for a bloody minute? But yeah, you can see where the urge is coming from, right? Because I think with myth, the most exciting.
I want everything to make sense, so that I can sleep well at night.
I'm still thinking, like, just today, this idea of birthing and womb envy is something that has not left me since I started thinking about the question that you sent me earlier. So I'm going to I'm not putting money on it right now. And again, this is half-baked. This is still something that I'm playing with because it's literally a few hours old in my head. But I think there's something there about immaculate conception and this idea of creating without requiring other people to
Process.
create. मतलब हाँ हमको निकाल ही दिया यहाँ से पूरा का पूरा, and the one thing that men can't do, they are now doing, they are creating new kinds of full on artificial, so artificial but ठीक है, intelligence. And I
Wow.
think there's something in the birthing metaphor there that I'm excited about, and I'm going to keep thinking about it for a minute. But so, is that a new mythology? No, it's not. But that is one way in which I'm tempted to try and just sit with the idea and see what it tells me about the birth of this newness, which is not so new after all, which was what I was saying earlier, right? So,
do you think it's useful to have this myth? Do you think it could be a kinder myth, a more
I
possible?
would like to. I mean, I'm all for stories that look, stories can shock or scare, invite us in all at the same time. So I'm not scared of a scary story. Let's just put it that way.
Mhm.
Although I do think that, I mean, there's got to be warmer, more orange stories out there as well. I haven't found many, and I certainly haven't. Here's the rich part. I haven't found many coming from the people who are making AI. The AI maker community that I was talking about, that I've been studying a little bit, thoda discourse analysis type stuff, just looking at the ways in which they're talking about what they're making, it's not particularly kind. They're the ones who are saying Pandora's box, Frankenstein's monster, Yevo, the Shogoth, Yevo, Yevo. At the moment, the kindest, happiest thing I have is the smiley on the Shogoth, which is coming
Yeah.
from the human face that we're trying to impose on something that we genuinely don't have the tools to understand how it's doing what it's doing. The black box wala metaphor,
Yeah.
literal and metaphor. Whoa. So I don't know. I don't know. Maybe the Shogat with a little smiley on it is as much as we've got at the moment, but I don't look at that as a bad thing. Is again what I'm saying. I'm more excited than I am nervous. Oh, are people going to lose jobs? I already know someone who's lost a job
Yeah.
to GPT.
Yeah. Sure.
And I'm petrified of the changes that are coming because we've always already been a society that's not very good at dealing with things like that. We
Correct.
live in desperately unequal times. Do I think that this has the potential to amp that up enormously? I do, and that
Yeah.
scares the shit out of me. But
Right.
intellectually, what this is
Mm.
makes me excited. And
Mm.
also, I said, one more intelligence. There's room in my toolkit for so many. Wood, trees are intelligent, animals are intelligent. All the dogs I live with certainly are far more intelligent than I am. Why not artificial intelligence as well? That bit I'm not so nervous about.
How
So
many
where are we going to
Siganporia?
find meaning? We're going to find meaning weirdly in empathy. We're going to find meaning in care work. We're going to go back to everything the Enlightenment in those centuries that I was talking about a few minutes ago told us was not valuable, because that's what makes us human. That's
Lovely.
what we're.
Fantastic. How many Siganporia? This is a wonderful empathetic note to end our two things conversation with. This was so brilliant. What I do, what I've taken off immediately from here is the empathy angle that you just spoke about, and be very careful about meaning making, especially with AI, and choose well, model well. I think in general. So thank you so
Yes,
much, and I'm going to speak to you more often on
I'd
different
like
subjects.
that.
Maybe music the next time, but this time we're going to do, this what we did. Thank you.